2024 presented us with some dark days. And while speaking out against apartheid and genocide never seemed more important, it got online users in big trouble. I'm Annalise Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we look at a year of online censorship and whether the internet can and will ever be free.
Hi! Oh my god, okay, so this video might get me banned, but I want to talk about something so important. Sorry for the censorship. I just really hope this one doesn't get taken down like the last one I made.
Meta hired a former high-ranking Israeli government employee just her to go in and censor a bunch of pro-Palestine content. Jordana Cutler was hired as Meta's Israel and Jewish diaspora chief. If that position itself isn't a red flag, she was also Netanyahu's personal advisor for almost 5 years.
Hey Australia, what's new with you? So we're not going to be letting kids who are under 16 to use social media anymore. Really, why? Well, our Prime Minister is saying that social media is actually hurting kids.
Without your consent, Instagram has decided that you don't like or want to see political content. So they've just gone ahead and limited it for you.
For the past 14 years, Freedom House, which is an American organization, has been publishing Freedom on the Net, a report about web censorship. And for 14 consecutive years, the report has found a decline in global internet freedom. Of the 72 countries covered by this year's study, 27 presented deteriorating conditions for human rights online. The largest decline reported in Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Iraq, and Zimbabwe. What about Western democracies, supposedly the beacon of free speech, where people lost followers, accounts, jobs, and where platforms were banned and blocked? To discuss, we're joined today by Paul Bigger, software engineer and founder of Tech for Palestine, Simas Akhtar, former Meta data analyst and founder of the Meta Stop Censoring Palestine initiative, and tech journalist Naomi Brockwell, president of the Ludlow Institute, a nonprofit focused on advancing freedom through technology. Thank you all so much for your time. Before we start the conversation, though, we were also supposed to be joined by Nika Dad, who sent us this message instead.
Ironically, I'm recording this message because the very censorship that we are discussing in this live stream has actually silenced my ability to participate live. But just to give a little bit of sense that what has been happening is over the past many months, and now for the past few days, Pakistan has faced yet another wave of internet shutdown and censorship, which has not only disrupted lives economically and lives of normal users, but also silenced dissent and undermined fundamental rights like freedom of expression and access to information. And these measures enacted without transparency or accountability, not only harming individuals, but also crippling the digital economy and our collective ability to stay connected. Unfortunately, this isn't unique to Pakistan. Governments around the world are increasingly weaponizing internet shutdowns and censorship to suppress dissent and control narratives. These actions threaten global freedoms and highlight the urgent need for accountability, transparency, and respect for human rights in digital governance, especially when it comes to government's accountability.
Nikat Dad there saying governments are weaponizing internet shutdowns across the world. Naomi, I'd like your take on this. I mean, from what you've seen across the world, what were the biggest examples of freedoms being curtailed online in 2024?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I do think that censorship is being weaponized by governments. They're using very cushy phrases. They're using a lot of scare tactics in order to convince the population that it's in their best interest. But the end result is that individuals are having their voices shut down. and entire countries are being stopped from participating in global conversations because their governments have decided that they're not allowed to participate. And I just think that this is freedom of speech should be a fundamental human right. I think that we should fight for the global ability for people to participate in conversations. And I think that we shouldn't buy into these narratives that this is for our own protection. I think that if there are bad ideas out there that we want shut down, we should combat them with better ideas, not with censorship. And that's the only way to have a flourishing democracy and a flourishing free society.
And obviously, not only voices are being censored, but also ideas. Paul, the United Nations put out a report saying that the conflict in Gaza has unleashed a global crisis of freedom of expression. Rarely has a conflict challenged freedom of opinion and expression so broadly and so far beyond its borders. The report also says that the unprecedented level of killing of journalists, attacks and restrictions on the media have made reporting difficult and dangerous. And social media have played an important role as the main conduit of information to and from besieged population, but we're also a vector of disinformation and hate speech. What would you say has been the role of social media this year in terms of disseminating alternative narratives and voices that we're not seeing on mainstream media, but also curtailing some of those same voices?
So what we're seeing is that social media is the primary conduit by which displaced Gazans, genocided Gazans are putting out information about what is happening in Gaza, what Israel is doing in South Lebanon as well. However, that information is no longer making it to mainstream. Meta and other platforms have been shutting down and suppressing that content so that it stays either within its own algorithmic bubble of people who are already participating in that content, or are entirely shutting down accounts or are suppressing the content. They are not super quiet about the ways that they're doing it. They're very willing to be loud about the policies that they're taking on in order to shut down this content. And it is very clear that it is an Israeli campaign to shut down people's freedom of speech about Palestine and to keep people quiet about the Palestine question.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we were just talking about governments interfering, but then you also have private companies. I mean, back in December of 2023, Human Rights Watch had already concluded that Meta's approach to pro-Palestinian content was problematic, to say the least. We asked Human Rights Watch for an update, and here's where things stand now.
In the wake of the October 2023 hostilities between Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups, Meta's platforms, particularly Instagram and Facebook, have been systematically silencing pro-Palestinian voices. Human Rights Watch documented over 1,050 cases of undue censorship during this period alone. This censorship targets peaceful content in support of Palestine, suppressing critical discussions about human rights abuses. Human Rights Watch in its report called on Meta to overhaul its policies to ensure they align with international human rights standards. This includes revising the DOI policy to make it more precise and equitable, increasing transparency around government requests to remove content, and improving its appeal mechanisms to provide users with access to effective remedy. Meta must also address broader patterns of bias in its content moderation systems, and the company needs to carry out human rights due diligence, audits of automated tools, and temporary algorithm changes that disproportionately affect Palestinian voices and those advocating in support of Palestine. This is more than digital rights. This is about fundamental principles, freedom of expression, access to information of everyone, regardless of their political or geographic context.
Sima, your take on this, on what you have seen and experienced. You were fired from Meta earlier this year. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so back in October, November timeframe, a lot of us employees started noticing all of these issues of censorship on Instagram and Facebook, and we raised these the work of human rights organization and other digital rights organizations that were documenting and researching this issue. And we were also noticing just on our own Instagram accounts, users complaining about it, our friends reaching out to us and being like, hey, what's going on? So we tried to raise these issues internally with specific product teams as well as specific leaders. But then we started noticing that our own posts were getting taken down internally. This was even simple posts in our employee resource groups, like the Muslims Employee Resource Group, the Palestinians Employee Resource Group, just offering condolences to our colleagues or even mentioning the crisis that was occurring in Palestine. And these posts were getting taken down. So we were alarmed, to say the least. So I decided to help write a letter addressed to our leadership to raise these concerns, and collected signatures internally. We collected over 450 signatures before Meta found out about the letter. And the reaction was to disable all of my system access, place me under investigation, delete the letter, including going into people's Google Drive trash cans to delete any copies of the letter, and never addressing the contents or the concerns within the letter.
Wow.
After putting me under investigation for 2 months, after I returned, I continued pressing for reasons for why was I placed under investigation for so long without any reasonable explanation, and kept pressing for responses to that letter. And as I continued my advocacy, I was intimidated and ultimately fired. The technical reason that they gave me was data exfiltration. I made a personal copy of a 47-page report that employees had put together to simply summarize all of the issues of Palestine censorship that we had been raising over the past few months. This was not an official work report. It was simply voluntarily put together by employees.
And so because you copied that letter, they simply fired you. What is fascinating and obviously heartbreaking about your story is that while this is going on obviously inside Meta, outside we are starting to understand that some of our posts are disappearing, are not being seen. We are being shadow banned. And among the accounts being shadow banned across the world was Hamza's, who shares with his 1 million followers on Instagram some of the exchanges he has with Israelis online. Take a look.
Where are you from?
I'm from Palestine.
I come and occupy this land. I f*** you. You can't do anything. I kill you.
And I use the idea to find you and kill you, okay?
Why?
Okay.
I use my platforms such as Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok to advocate for the Palestinian cause, amplifying the voices that are being silenced. Last month, I woke up one day ready to post another video as usual, only to find out that I wasn't able to log into my Instagram account. Literally overnight, my main Instagram account, a page with 1 million followers, was deleted. All of my videos where I exposed Zionists were completely gone. They gave me no actual reason other than there were too many violations, which is simply untrue since I've never had a problem with Instagram before. Each platform has a different system when it comes to bans or pages getting deleted, but the majority of people on Instagram who lose their account like this never get them back. What I feared most was losing my ability to make a positive impact on the Palestinian cause. Thankfully, I got my account back. I immediately went to every friend that had connections with Instagram, and together they filed complaints to help get my account back up. After countless complaints, they restored my account, but the negative impact still remains.
Naomi, silencing voices and preventing different points of view and facts from having space on the internet is obviously very dangerous. How prevalent would you say that became during this particular context of Israel's war on Gaza?
I think we've seen censorship all over the place. And as you mentioned at the start of the show, it's just been increasing. The internet freedom is really going down as governments realize that this is a weapon that they can use to control narratives. And it's a very blunt weapon as well that stops everyone from speaking their mind. And you also mentioned, we've got government doing censorship, but we've got private platforms doing censorship. But I would argue that they're very much intertwined these days. When you have governments that can put pressure on platforms and they can, intimidate them, they can somewhat covertly coerce them into doing things by threatening them with antitrust lawsuits or any number of violations. You see that a lot of these platforms are simply complying. It's in their best interest, otherwise they will get shut down. So I definitely see this as very much a government-led effort across the world, governments using this to control speech within their countries. And it isn't just in the countries that you'd expect. It is in Western democracies where we say that we have free speech, but time and time again, we see people just be shut down for their viewpoints. And I think it's a really dangerous direction that we're headed in.
Whole big tech's relationship with Israel became significantly more apparent, I would say, during this past year, not only because of the policy these big companies adopt, but also because of the people they choose to put at the top. Would you say these apps are ready to change anything about their concept and the way they do things?
Not at all. I don't think so. There is a system where Israeli startups get sold to big tech companies, and what they get out of that is they get a lot of employees in Israel, and those employees then become internal advocates for Israel. In some cases, as in the case of Meta, with Guy Rosen or Jordana Cutler, those are extremely high level individuals who have an extraordinary amount of power in policy making. But the same is true across almost every big tech company. They have hundreds, in some cases thousands. Google has 2,000 employees in Israel. And those people are on the front lines of changing policy internally at those big tech companies and in suppressing the conversations internally that would lead to more equitable, more human rights policies being taken. So it is very much a deliberate policy that is discussed widely in Israel, where startups which are founded by army, by people coming out of the army, in particular, one particular unit called Unit 8200, start startups, and then those startups get acquired into big tech, and then they have a significant amount of voices within big tech, which of course is not equitable for Palestinians or for other states around that region.
Sima, your thoughts on this? Are you hopeful at all that Meta could change its ways due to, I don't know, pressure and the volume of information we now have about how everything is being operated?
Yeah, after spending so many months internally trying to raise these concerns, and so many of us respectfully speaking with so many different leaders, and ultimately seeing it fall on deaf ears, I'm more to believe now that public pressure is the way to get Meta to listen to us, to even acknowledge. Firstly, I just want them to acknowledge, hey, there is an issue of Palestine censorship on Meta platforms. So either public pressure or through the legal system, as we saw with Francis Haugen having to take Meta to court about harm to teens, or whether there is enough anger from users and a viable alternative for users to start exploring if Meta doesn't address these concerns of censorship.
We're obviously not saying that all the censorship came from Meta, because there are other news that happened in 2024, but that aspect of the story was so big that we had to devote some time to it. But I want to change gears now and ask Naomi about TikTok, because 2024 was also the year that saw TikTok under a lot of pressure. Canada ordered it to shut down. In the US, users could be barred from accessing the app from January. I mean, TikTok has 170 million active users in the US. Nearly 40% of adults under 30 say they get their news on TikTok. More than 7 million small businesses use it. But lawmakers from both sides say it's a major threat to the nation. TikTok is a gun aimed at Americans' heads. Is it?
No, it's a social media platform. So I have a lot of issue with this. It's probably a more nuanced take. If we address the question of, is TikTok directing propaganda our way, getting us to think in a certain way? Is it being hijacked to change the way we think about certain issues, who we vote for? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's doing all of those things. So I think people are right to be concerned that this platform is a dangerous tool that is very secretly changing our minds when we may not even realize it. But is every other social media platform doing this also? Yes, absolutely. And so politicians, they start rampaging against TikTok, saying that this is this unique case, and if we just ban TikTok, then we've saved the internet and we can no longer be led astray when it comes to what we think, because we'll only have pure sources. And it's just absolutely not true. So the conversation needs to zoom out, and we need to be aware that everyone is trying to hijack our attention. And it's not just social media. It's when we use Google. What sort of search results are put at the very top of the search page? All of these things are hijacked. We do know that there are profiles made about us basically by data brokers who are collecting every single part of our digital trail on the internet. They're selling this, and what they're selling is our attention. This is not just being sent to consumer products to sell us a new pair of shoes. It's being sent to people and sold to people who do want to change our minds about topics. So we need to understand that this problem is across all of the internet, and just be more discerning about what we consume and not take everything at face value. Banning TikTok isn't going to save us.
On the other side of the world, I would say, Australia, they're planning on banning children from under the age of 16, anyone aged 16 and under, from creating accounts on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, citing children's safety. Many people are questioning that, saying that's not exactly what's happening. Your take, Naomi, briefly on this. What have you concluded from this debate? Is it to help protect children?
It's never to help protect children. And even if it were, let's think about the apparatus that would have to be put in place in order to enforce this. You are asking all users of the internet to hand over government IDs in order to use different platforms. That creates huge vulnerability, because now social media companies have giant databases filled with people's information, and we know that they can't protect them. There are data breaches every single day. And there's a great quote from the former president of Cisco who said there are two types of companies in the world: those that have been hacked and those that don't yet realize they have been hacked. So to create this treasure trove and make people more vulnerable is dangerous. But then once you have that list, it's only a matter of time before they start adding more things to it. What is the next objectionable content that people aren't allowed to look at? It becomes very easy to just add things to that list once we've set it up. So I just think that it's really dangerous. I think it disenfranchises young people. It means that they can no longer participate in global conversations, which I don't think is good for society at all. I mean, I just don't understand why the government is making this decision when it should be up to parents whether their children go on social media.
And I mean, there's just so much more that I would like to talk about, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want Paul on one final word here on the difficult task ahead in terms of building a trustworthy online environment. What does that look like, in your opinion? What would it take in 2025 and beyond for the internet to be a place and a space we can trust?
So in the case of trusting what's happening on the internet, we have to realize that we are being what we are experiencing is propaganda, and what we are seeing online is an attempt to control the narrative, and that attempt is being made by governments, it's being made by big tech, and is being made in response to U.S. foreign policy. U.S. foreign policy wants to support Israel. And Israel is very happy to have these conversations shut down because they are pro-Palestine. Naomi mentioned objectionable content is the reason that these things are being shut down. That's exactly right. In a conversation between Secretary Blinken and Romney, they said out loud that TikTok is being shut down because there's too much Palestinian content on it. And so we're left with this situation where the social media and the dissemination of news as we see it is being controlled by government entities, and is being done deliberately, and our ability to speak on the issue is being shut down. So to fix it, we need to remove those powers that social media companies have to limit our conversations, and that governments have to control those narratives.
And that will take a lot of work and many more discussions like this one to spread some good ideas. But for now, Paul, Simas, and Naomi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep this conversation going online. You can share your thoughts and comments with us using the hashtag or the handle AJStream. Take care, and I'll see you soon.